Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth panel discussion of the Future City Conference. In the next hour, we are going to discuss how the renovation wave strategy of the European Commission can contribute to the green and the digital transitions in urban areas. I would like to start, however, by thanking Forum Europe for arranging this excellent event and by presenting our fantastic group of distinguished speakers. In alphabetic order, Dr. Anna Vera Deinhammer, Coordinator for the Construction Industry and Program Lead for Do Think Circular City Vienna 2020-2030, City of Vienna. Mr. Dominic Campanella, Co-Founder at Concular. Mr. Robert Dijksterhuis, Envoy Sustainable Building, Dutch Ministry of the Interior and Kingdom Relations. Mr. Stefan Moser, Head of Unit, Building and Products, DG Energy, European Commission, and Dr. Stephen Richardson, Director, European Regional Network, World Green Building Council. Before giving the floor to our speakers, I would like to provide some background to this webinar and spell out the key questions we aim to answer today. So let's start from the very general background. Europe aims to become the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050. Overall, buildings in Europe are responsible for about 40% of the total energy consumption, and their use and operation are responsible for almost 40% of the EU greenhouse gas emissions from energy. More than 220 million of buildings, representing 85% of the EU building stock, were built before 2001, and most of them are not energy efficient. Almost 95% of the buildings that exist today will still be standing in 2050. The average annual energy renovation rate in Europe is at around 1%, but if we look at deep renovation, so the one that reduce energy consumption by at least 60%, deep renovation are carried out only in 0.2% of the building stock per year. To cut a long story short, at this pace, cutting carbon emissions from the building sector to net zero would require centuries. In this context, the communication A Renovation Wave for Europe, issued by the European Commission in October 2020 as part of the broader European Green Deal, set out a strategy to at least double the annual renovation rate of buildings by 2030 and to foster deep energy renovations. Action included in the strategy go from the revision of the Energy Performance of Building Directive to more and better EU funding, from technical assistance to upskilling and reskilling of construction workers and professionals, from fighting energy poverty to ensuring affordable housing, from circularity to citizen participation. These actions are expected to result in 35 million buildings renovated by 2030. The renovation wave also identifies a number of key principles for building renovation, which I really believe can inspire today's panel discussion. Energy efficiency first, affordability, decarbonization and integration of renewables, life cycle thinking and circularity, high health and environmental standards, tackling the twin challenges of the green and digital transitions together, and also respect for aesthetics and architectural quality. Against this background, today's webinar intends to answer some key questions for a circular and smart urban transformation to materialize. Is the renovation wave strategy good enough to decarbonize building in cities and encourage the modernization and revitalization of urban areas? How can we ensure the right rules, incentives, and financing instruments? What needs to be done to enhance the circularity of construction materials throughout the entire value chain? How can digital solutions help with the design, planning, and delivery of energy efficiency buildings? To answer these questions, our panelists will have 5 minutes each for a first round of introductory remarks. After this first round, all speakers will have another minute each for an additional remark in reaction to the other speaker statements. Then I will open the floor to questions from the audience. All participants in the webinar are invited to type their question in the chat box. But now, without further ado, let me invite Anna Vera to start with their remarks. Thank you, Anna Vera.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for the invitation to talk very briefly about the Viennese approach to a more regenerative built environment in terms of refurbishments and, of course, of newly builds. The city of Vienna committed itself to the integrated consideration of climate protection, climate change mitigation, and of course, resource conservation by means of circular economy aspects in the current progress coalition we are running now. This means, above all, when it comes to renovation or refurbishments, these projects should not only be improved in terms of energy efficiently when the building is used in an active way. We need to consider the grey energy to the embodied energy of a building. So at the same time, the circularity of the respective object, what we are trying to refurbish, has to be provided too. So only with this integrated approach in mind, it is possible for us to tackle our smart city Wien goals, namely ensuring that from 2030 onwards, site and use appropriate planning and building for maximum resource conservation becomes a standard. So this means, under these new circumstances, getting access to the anthropogenic stock using locally harvested materials and products. And we have another very, very important goal that from 2050 onwards, 80% of the materials and building products of large-scale renovation or refurbishments and dismantled buildings has to be reused or recycled. And for this reason, we are on the path towards strengthening information, legal certainty, and of course, incentives for renovation and refurbishment. For example, building renovation activities will be linked to a building material passport, fostering to harvest as well as using circular construction materials. This should lead to bunch of green job creation, upskilling workers, and attracting new talents, as the Viennese model of social urban mining, especially for the second labor market, proves already. We need to acknowledge that we will have to manage infinitely with finite resources. And those finite resources are materials, products, but human resources and space too. And in addition, we must understand that buildings cannot be retrofitted in terms of circularity. If materials and building products are used in an inseparable way, they are lost forever to any further use. And therefore, we try to give the Viennese building culture a new or additional spin of thinking from the end, respecting, combining the end of the life cycle of a building with the very beginning of another project. So the program Do Tank Circular City Wien 2020 to 2030 of the Executive Group of Construction and Technology, where I'm engaged to, of the city of Vienna, addresses these major future topics of digitalization and circular economy. So this Do Tank Circular City Wien represents a holistic cross-municipal hub for all aspects of the circular economy in the built environment for refurbishments as well as newly built. But of course, renovation and refurbishment is one of our major topics because 90% of the city, which will be assessed in the next years, are built now. So as a flagship project of the economic strategy, Vienna 2030, the Do Tank promotes the transition to a circular city in a strategic way and operationally as a transdisciplinary program. And this long-term goal is, of course, to integrate the entire resource cycle of the building environment, so building, infrastructure, and open space, from production to disposal or recycling into a whole sustainability concept, while avoiding, of course, waste and inefficient use of raw materials and energy. So, to sum up my points, we are running for 4 goals until 2030. the city has to act as a pioneer. So the topic of a circular city will be well established and applied in the city of Vienna and the organizations within our sphere of influence. Secondly, the built environment has to be recognized as a stock of materials, and construction projects are planned and built in a way which is durable, deconstructible, or separable. And third, the fundamentals for material transparency, for example, which materials are used in the buildings, when, where, how, and in which kind of quality in the built environment will be created. And last but not least, for me, it's one of the most important goals we really need to tackle. The economic advantages of a circular built environment will be identified and demonstrated throughout the municipality as well as the whole society. So thank you so much for the invitation. I really hope I kept my time. This was very briefly our approach to a more sustainable environment.
Thank you very much, Anna Vera, for also being very timely with your remarks. And now I leave the floor to Stefan for his 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Felice. Also Anna Vera for this very interesting and fascinating introduction which you made about what you're doing in the city of Vienna. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be with you. I think what Anna Vera just mentioned about Vienna is really exemplary. We need to combine in a holistic strategy all the different aspects. Make sure also that material use will be optimized, that we recover materials from renovations, from possibly sometimes taking down a building, that nothing is lost, that we completely integrate circularity aspects in our future building policies. Look at also at nature-based solutions and make the cities the key players. Local politicians, but also regional politicians, will be the key drivers of the renovation wave. They know best what are the challenges, what are the deficits of the current building stock. We need to work at the level of neighborhoods, together with the citizens, to develop a common agenda. What are the objectives? This requires a democratic process, and therefore local politicians, but also citizens' initiatives will play a key role to make sure that everyone will actually then agree, or at least the large majority will agree to go into a renovation, which creates quite some inconveniences in the first place, noise, dirt, but people will be motivated once they see the benefits, not only energy, climate, transport integration, renewable energy, but also health and especially comfort, safety, and making a better urban environment out of it with more greening and simply what people see then as real improvements. And we are, from the Commission side, trying to support that from the EU side with legislation, with finance, with technical advice, but also in very close cooperation with the member states at national level, which also have to support their cities and their regions, break down basically support schemes in a way which makes them accessible to the key players at local and regional level, and explain and provide information how to do that. As said, we will have to work at a higher level of aggregation in the future, not only individual buildings to overcome planning difficulties, financing difficulties. From the EU side, we will open up the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, which creates then the necessary incentives that drive forward, notably with the introduction of minimum energy performance standards, in a phased manner, also targeted manner, to provide also sufficient and appropriate flexibility to the member states and to the players at the local and regional level, and also improve the information tools to introduce and to improve the tools which provide evidence, knowledge to the people transparently through the energy performance certificates, and then especially also have building renovation passports as a strategy for a building or a type of building to go about in a structured manner in different steps towards a deep renovation. We do recognize we cannot have a deep renovation in one go, and we should not even have, because it would make the building unlivable. But what we need is to make sure that each individual step will be a way forward, will not stand in the way of ambitious further steps, will not preclude them, but builds one upon the other. And for that, we need building renovation passports. We also need digital solutions. We need to think about energy poverty, affordability. There's a huge case for public goods being created here. So therefore, also the justification for public aid, for subsidies coming in. So this all will have to be factored in, and we stand ready to work with the cities and regions, also by providing good practices and facilitating the exchange of good practices throughout Europe and even globally. I think that's extremely important. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'll be very happy to discuss later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for providing the EU perspective, which is very important to implement the renovation wave in cooperation with cities and local authority. Now, I would like to hear more from Robert, which can provide the member state perspective. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Felice. Thank you very much for having me here today. So, from my side, well, I've learned that it's best to always start with the why question. So why did we have that renovation strategy again? Why are we talking about digital twins, circularity, etc.? So, and that is because we want to limit global warming and we want to restore biodiversity in order to maintain our quality of life in the future as well. And while we're at it, we might as well take measures that even improve the quality of life. That doesn't have to cost anything. It can even be cheaper if you do it smartly. So the renovation wave is about stopping using fossil fuels to heat and cool our buildings. We're also going to stop using unsustainable materials and stop unsustainable behavior. And in the coming decades, we will switch to a sustainable fossil-free energy supply and use the use of circular materials. So we know that the built environment has a contribution to make to stopping climate change. By 2050, it was mentioned already by you, Felice, that we have to make this 220 million buildings in the EU fossil-free, highly energy efficient and sustainable. That's quite a challenge. So how are we going to handle that? Well, this will differ per home, per building, per district. After all, a monument in the historic heart of a city that requires a different solution than an apartment in a suburb. And climate circumstances in Amsterdam are quite different from those in Athens. So sustainability therefore starts at the building level with the owner and the occupant of the building taking action. And they can be supported in this by municipal, national or European policy. And European policy, I must say. So for example, in the Netherlands, we have instructed all our municipalities to come up with a heat vision this year, in which choices are made for each district together with residents and other stakeholders about the sustainable heat supply of their neighborhood in the future. So this way the homeowner knows what to take into account when making his home more sustainable through the building renovation passport, as Stefan Moser just said. So, but he has to know, will there be a high or low temperature heating network, or will the neighborhood go for an all-electric solution, for example? On a national level, we look at how we can support homeowners and residents, both generically as well as specifically those with a small budget, in taking these sustainability measures. And we stimulate innovation and industrialization so that the renovation measures become more cost effective. And so the European Commission is working on lots of new legislation to support this transformation, just like Stefan just mentioned. I'm very pleased to see that the Commission will introduce a very broad, comprehensive and integrated package, because that is what we need. We need to adjust the EPBD, we need to adjust the CPR, so the Construction Products Regulation, but also the Eco-Design Directive, but also we need to reach new agreements on taxing energy consumption, on trading in CO2 emissions, and on a number of other measures. So I'm really looking forward to the presentation of the Fit for 55 policy package on July 14th by the European Commission. And I hope we can get started soon because, well, after all, the task of renovating 220 million buildings, that is very large and we have no time to lose. And finally, I was really inspired by the initiative of the Commission of the new European Bauhaus. In the end, the renovation wave, it's not about new legislation. It's not about simplified introducing many technological inventions. It all starts with the people living in the cities. They have to take action to make their home, their neighborhood fit for the challenges of the 21st century. And how can we together make it more beautiful, sustainable together? So that's what I hope that we can do. We can inspire each other to take action. And well, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. So I understand that we need to have a very tailor-made approach to make the renovation wave happen. So probably, Steven, you can help us understanding what is this policy mix that we need to work with the renovation wave.
Yeah, thanks, Felice. Thank you to the other speakers, and good morning, everybody. Real pleasure to be with you this morning. So I'm here representing the European Network of Green Building Councils. That's part of the World GBC. And our GBCs have been working on the renovation challenge for many years now. And this morning, I'd like to share a few of the lessons we've learned through one of our flagship programs on building renovation, which is called Build Upon Squared. It's the second phase of an EU-funded project that's led by 8 of our members in partnership with Climate Alliance and the Building Performance Institute Europe. And its focus is on equipping cities to play a strategic role in joining the dots between national policy and if you like, the real renovation action, which obviously happens at the local level. And I think that's a key message is that you know, we need to join those dots between the different levels of policy. So it's been great to hear already previous speakers, especially Stefan Moser, mentioning that, you know, the kind of interplay between those different levels. And I think it's really key to recognize that there's no one size fits all. We've heard also already about the kind of diversity of different situations. You know, every country, every city, every building, and even every owner and occupant is different and unique, and we have to have policies and initiatives that are flexible enough to work with that diversity. So it's really critical that we identify what is working and what isn't in a given context, and by doing this, you know, we can then see what's successful and what's not, and where real impact is being achieved. And we're as part of Build Upon Squared, working with cities to equip them with an impact framework, a tool that allows them to track those multiple benefits. But there's a couple of key ingredients that we recognize are crucial for policy and initiatives, regardless of where you're working. And the first is that renovation initiatives, renovation policy needs to become more data-driven. We need to understand, as I've just said, what's working and what's not. And to do that, we need information, we need data. And that data needs to be holistic. We need to capture a holistic view of the benefits of renovation. There are multiple benefits, but often those aren't being looked at holistically or joined together. And to take that holistic approach, we need a multi-stakeholder approach, and we've already heard that from some of the previous speakers, which is really encouraging. We need to bring those multiple stakeholders that stand to benefit from renovation to the table when we're shaping and designing initiatives, and when we're shaping and designing policy, whether that's local or national or indeed EU policy. And that engagement of local actors is so key. So that's the fourth point: engaging with people on the ground who stand to benefit, but also stand to be impacted by renovation, to really understand their needs. And the final point, and I think it's really encouraging to have heard this at the very outset of this session this morning, is we need a whole life cycle approach. I saw a study recently that showed that looked at the life cycle of different insulation solutions, and the payback on the embodied carbon varies from 1 year to 23 years for different types of insulation. So it's critical that we look holistically, but we also look across the whole life cycle and take that, you know, build circularity into our approaches to renovation, so that we're not causing unintended consequences when we do undertake renovation. And I'm really excited to hear the debate that's going to unfold with this great panel of speakers. Thank you.
Steven, thank you very much. So I understand you placed a lot of emphasis on the digital and data-driven aspects, and we have heard already about the central role of circularity. So I really think that now it's time for Dominic to tell us more about concular, because both topics are certainly covered by your company. Dominic, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Felice, and thanks to the other speakers before, and for the opportunity to be today here speaking at this panel. I'm one of the co-founders of Concular, and Concular is basically a digital platform for the circular economy in the construction industry. We are based in Germany, and we are reintroducing materials from deconstruction projects into new construction projects, and with that saving CO2. And we are doing that by digitizing materials in buildings. And because we then have an identity of these materials, we are able to reintroduce them into new projects. And based on all the remarks from the previous speakers, I want to share a bit experience from a startup and how what opportunities and what ways there are for a startup. I mean, as also everyone already mentioned, is that the cities face significant challenges for the future. So the largest challenge is the climate change, and a lot of the cities already committed to carbon neutrality until 2030, 2035. And to really reach that goal, we really have to look in the construction sector. As Felice already pointed out, 40% of GHG emissions are coming from that sector. But the largest problem is actually not the energy used in the maintenance phase. The largest problem is actually the so-called embodied carbon, which was also mentioned. So it's actually the CO2 which is polluted for the manufacturing of construction materials. And that is very important because today a significant amount of buildings are demolished after only around 40 years. And the materials from these buildings that are getting landfilled or, in the best case, downcycled. Also, a lot of these materials can be actually reused. And with the renovation wave, we will even see more demolition or partly demolition of buildings. And right now, actually, the reuse rate is only 1%. So with an increase of these materials, we really have to think about the reuse. And what's also very striking is actually that now on the same place where this building was demolished, a new building is built with new materials, most of the time with the same function. So we have to find ways to reintroduce these materials to significantly reduce the CO2 emissions, as the CO2 emissions just for the production of materials are responsible for 20% of global GHG emissions. And this is an approach where we really have to look at the whole life cycle. And for that, there must be a mindset change. The cities, and as Anna actually already pointed out, have to be seen as material minds. Basically, everything is already built in our cities, and all the materials are already there because it's our built environment which is providing these materials. So actually, we don't have to build anything new. And if we build something new, we can use the resources we already have in our city. And that's why we can look at the city as an urban mine. And this urban mine is the most local supply chain you can imagine. We don't have to export any materials and resources anymore. And so we just have to actually harvest these materials. And this is actually what has to be done. So you first have to identify the materials which are in our city. And that has to be done with digitalization, because buildings are built in a way today that they are not documented. So we don't know. So in the building you are right now, no one knows what materials are inside. So the first step is to digitize, and you digitize with the so-called material passports. And then you know what materials are in these buildings. Then you can match the supply with the demand for it in new projects. And this is basically then a local supply chain, because when you know a building is demolished and the materials from this demolishing building are needed in the new building, you can organize this whole process of getting the material out of the demolition building and putting into the new building. And so local supply chains are are starting to emerge with also local jobs, and that's great also for the whole economy. And with Concula, basically, this is what we do. So with Concula, we provide a platform to manage the whole process. So you can digitize the materials and buildings in your city. You can get the demand from new projects. We match it, and you can also completely organize the supply chain to get the materials from the demolition site to the new site. And most important, also to really calculate the impact in the end. So with the life cycle assessment, it's very important to calculate how much GHG emissions are actually saved by reusing these materials. We are doing this right now in Germany and already reintroduced thousands of materials, and of course looking forward for similar solutions in other countries. And for that, it's of course also very important to have the legislative framework for that. And I also see that some cities already act, such as Amsterdam, Berlin, or also Vienna. And I hope more cities follow, and of course the legislation also follows for that. And with that, thank you a lot for your invitation.
Thank you very much, Dominic. So as you were all very timely, and you said in your 5 minutes, I would like to open just another quick round of comments, starting again from Anna Vera, in reaction to these introductory remarks. So Anna Vera, the floor is yours. You are muted, Anna Vera.
So now you can hear me. Thank you. First of all, I have to point out that Dominic and me, we did not rehearse. It is so good that we are talking with one voice. This is really it is so good, this experience, and I really it is encouraging me that we are all talking about this holistic approach, and we are combining decarbonization with resource conservation. Yeah, this is from me. I'm really delighted that we are speaking with one voice.
Stefan, your round.
Thank you very much again, Felice, and to all of you for the very interesting statements. Indeed, I think we are pretty much converging, and that's very reassuring, because I think that shows that we have collectively at least become aware of the challenges and how to address them. And I very much agree with all you've said. But I would also like to underline indeed what several have said, Stephen, but also Dominique. And Robert and Anna Vera, on the need to really act on the basis of evidence, data, to make sure that there's a complete inventory of what is in the buildings, in particular that information is not lost throughout the life cycle of buildings, that we follow a life cycle approach. Often the builders or those renovating a building know then pretty much what has happened, what is happening with the building. But if you don't document that properly, it will be lost over time, and there will be. And the challenge now is that there are different IT systems, different people coming in over time, and information is often lost. You would have to start from scratch again after a while throughout the life cycle of a building, and that often means that actually suboptimal solutions are then being put in place, which do not really either reuse all the materials or actually do not manage the energy system of the building in the best possible manner. So information, data, and acting then on the basis of evidence is crucial. There we will try from the Commission side also to put in place an improved framework to make sure that the energy performance certificates will be more highly performing. I mentioned already the building renovation task force, but also the digitalization to make them really accessible to all those who need to know. Of course, always making sure that data protection will be ensured, that data will not go into the wrong hands. So that is, I think, for me, key to implement the life cycle approach and optimal resource efficiency actions over the duration of the life of a building.
Thank you, Stefan. Robert, does the discussion match your experience in the Netherlands?
Well, yes, I think that's, well, if this were a debate, then it would be not that much of a debate, because we all agree so much with one another, but still, just to make some comments anyway, I think that, okay, going back once more to the renovation, why did we go for the renovation? That's because we want to lower the energy demand of buildings, and we want to switch these buildings from fossil fuel use to more sustainable heating. At least in the Netherlands, it's about heating. Additionally, in the Netherlands, we also need new buildings, not just recycling of buildings, or breaking down old buildings and making new ones, but we also have a high housing demand. We need 1 million more additional houses between now and 2030 because of a growing population and aging population, etc. So it's not a stable situation we're investing in. And I fully agree that we need an holistic approach, data-driven, using evidence, using data, but I still would like to say, okay, yes, we do need that, but we don't need to wait until it's all perfect. We need to start at the same time as well. So not wait until we have this really beautiful holistic package with all the data required, but start now and make it better along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Now the floor again to Steven.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I echo what Anna said about how great it is to hear the kind of consensus. I think it's important, though, to remember that in these kinds of events, you know, we in English we would say we're preaching to the choir. You know, we rarely reach beyond the kind of bubble of those who are already in the know, who already understand. There's a huge swathe of the public and even the industry, let's be honest, that are, you know, either don't share these views or just for whom, you know, these issues are just nowhere on their radar. And I think it's really critical that we think through carefully, how can we engage more broadly, and who can we engage with? You know, if we keep talking to the same people all the time, we won't reach, you know, the 35 million by 2030 or the 200 million by 2050 that we need to reach. So that's a really key point that we mustn't forget. That we need to engage with the unusual suspects if we want to really reach the scale that we need. Thank you.
Dominic, now it's your round, and I also would like to quickly ask you if we are ready or not for digitalization, also in reaction to Robert's comment.
Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate all the actions that are taken, also all the comments also from the ones before, especially what Vienna is doing. I think that's could be a role model, but also in the Netherlands, I see a lot of actions which are much better than in Germany. But what I think is very important that startups as ours, or like maybe in general solutions for that, because I think that there needs new digital solutions. They can only strive as much as legislation allows it. And I mean, normally it should be first prevent demolition instead of building something new, and then encourage reuse and recycle. And right now, legislation is doing the other way around. So it's encouraged to demolish, and it's encouraged to build new with new materials. So it has to switch. Otherwise, we can't do anything because there is not this economic balance. And I think there must be a lot must be done until we reach that. Still, I think we are at the beginning, and I think at the very beginning of the digital revolution in the construction sector. And maybe going back to your question, if we're ready. So it depends. So I think the mindset change in the construction industry is beginning, but there must be much more. There must be much more pressure also from the financial markets. There must be pressure from the politics. There must be pressure from the society, so that the mindset change is starting, so that we think about material passports and we really apply it. Because now, as maybe Steven said, like we are talking about that here. But like if you go to a project developer, they're telling you, yeah, nice thing. Do I get money for that? And so that's not, I mean, of course, it would be great if we can manage this economical balance, but we have to, there must be also people who really want to save our environment. And I think that there's still a lot of work to do.
Dominic, I think that your remark is perfect to open the Q&A, because you started to point out some of the problems that do exist preventing demolition rather than favoring demolition, or convincing the project developers. So the strategy is very nice, it can work, but we are going to face some or many obstacles. So I see that we already have some question from the audience, but I would like start with a question that I really think can help us to understand what does not work. So I would like to have another round, and based on your experience, I would like to hear what is the main barrier holding back renovation in European cities. So select the most important barrier for you. Again, we the same approach. We start with Anna Vera. What is the most important barrier for you, Anna Vera?
We realized that in practice, so however how big the owner's will is to refurbish or to renovate, they are often confronted with so complex technical, financial, and legal challenges that our existing service infrastructure does not meet in one step. So we are now starting creating an additional support service, and we are trying to bundling these various services and information in some kind of a one-stop shop, just to encourage the building owners to deal with all those obstacles, or that we can they hinder them in terms of the timeline, because we know time is money in the construction sector.
Thank you, Anna Vera. Stefan, the most important obstacle that you see?
Thank you, Felice. I think what we said in the renovation wave is that there's actually no such one most important obstacle, but a variety of barriers which we all need to tackle. But if I have to select one, I would indeed say it's a certain I would say obligation to do things when the opportunity presents itself, because I think many people will, in view of the problems just mentioned by Anna Vera, shy away from the technical complexities, but also the constraints which they're facing in terms of finance and knowledge, and then simply say, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I have too many things in my life, family and all things. I do just what is necessary to maintain the building, maybe to deal with humidity or some safety issues, and that's it. Otherwise, leave me alone. I think there needs to be this kind of push, really, that the renovation has to be carried out, either because the building is such a badly performing building that it simply cannot continue, or because the public sector puts in place support schemes which are so attractive that basically then you are jumping over this psychological barrier of, do I really have to do this now? And maybe let's postpone. I mean, every one of us likes postponing, yeah? So me the same, yeah? If there's a big task, do I really have to do it today? Can't I do it next year or in 2 years? I think that's the problem with renovations. There's so much inconvenience, and we need to trigger the necessary critical energy in a certain moment that you simply then have to go for it. And that's why we thought it's important to have neighborhood approaches, but also obligations for the worst performing buildings at least, but maybe even more broadly, where people are accompanied then basically and helped, but they have to go for it. Yeah? So and you get part of a dynamics then basically. Otherwise, we don't see that this kind of huge jump forward would happen. We would just carry on a bit business as usual, increasing a little bit, but not enough. We need to at least double renovation rates and also deepen, exploit the whole potential of renovations, and not just the most urgent improvements, which often are safety and a leak in the roof and all that. Yeah? So I think that's what we are aiming at.
Thank you. Robert, what is the main obstacle in the Netherlands?
Well, I fully agree with Stefan. It's a broad variety of issues, but and as a homeowner, it's all the inconvenience that's to really take action. Well, I fully agree with what Stefan just mentioned in that regard, so people tend to think, well, is it really going to happen? So can I postpone it, etc. So And that's what we try to do in the Netherlands, to make it really clear that, well, in the Netherlands, 89% of households have their own gas connection. So they use gas heating. And we have said as a government that between now and 2050, we will remove the gas heating system. That is a fact. So you have to change something in your house, because you cannot heat your building anymore with your gas connection. So you have to take action. And then we try to say, okay, and the sooner you take action, the cheaper it will be. But still, well, it's really hard to do so. And then, well, just like Anna Vera said, maybe if you have a one-stop shop to assist you, if you have a building renovation passport, if you have a passport as a homeowner, which you can show to some organization, a company, and say, okay, well, these are the requirements for renovating my building. Can you support me in that? Well, those kinds of businesses are lacking right now. So you have the solar panel installation service, and you have the heating installation service, and you have the installation service, but you don't have the integrated party who says, well, I'm going to support you in your inconvenience and make a renovation plan for you and assist you in that regard from A to Z. And that's, I think, a hole in the market which can be filled, and then maybe it will take off.
Thank you, Robert. Steven, the barriers that you met in implementing the project that you are leading at your company.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I agree with what's been said already. If I could add one point, I think we're still failing to join the dots when it comes to the multiple benefits of renovation. You know, we broadly know that there are all of these multiple benefits, but at the end of the day, the beneficiaries are different stakeholders. You know, whether it's the health benefits, you know, reductions in health spending, whether it's benefits around the actual energy consumption. There's obviously the kind of landlord-tenant split in some situations. So I think individually those benefits are modest, but when we look at the whole picture, there's a very, very compelling case, but we don't connect them effectively. And I think that's a really major barrier. And I think that, you know, that when we look at the really successful kind of pilot projects, it's those that have been able to kind of join those dots to kind of really just unlock that business case in the broadest sense, because that's ultimately what will drive kind of wider uptake, and that's one of the things that we're, with this sort of impact framework that we're testing with cities across Europe, we're trying to solve.
Thank you, Steven. So I understand that you see a broad positive benefit cost analysis. However, benefit and cost fall upon different stakeholders, and this can be a problem. Dominic, now the floor to you. Especially, you can provide the view of a startup, so a specific view of a kind of small and medium enterprise. So what are the barriers to the renovation wave?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot was already said actually from my previous speakers. So basically it's a mix, right? It's not economically attractive. There's not a lot of knowledge, not a lot of data, and complex laws. And yeah, actually what I can maybe add is just right now for construction companies or other stakeholders, it's just more attractive to build new than to renovate. And so there is a lot of money flowing into the construction sector and the real estate sector, right? So I think here you have to redirect the money into the right direction. So in that case, into the renovation. And so I think what Stefan also mentioned, the support schemes, I think that could be a good way. And on the other side, also to de-incentivize the construction of new buildings just for the sake of investments. Of course, like housing and so on is a problem, and you can do that, but I think we don't need another 2,000 luxury apartments somewhere, which no one can afford. So you can redirect that and make that more attractive by support schemes. And then I think the market will develop itself also, and solution will be created. Efficient solution will be, which will then reduce the complexity when you make it economically attractive.
Thank you, Dominic. The issue of affordability, but also the need to involve different type of stakeholders leads me to take one of the questions from the audience, the question from Lindsay Hendricks, consultant at Deloitte. New renovations working towards energy efficiency building should not lead to unbearable cost burdens to tenants. To what extent does the European Commission Renovation Wave proposal tackle the energy poverty issue? So I see here the issue of energy poverty, but also the issue of split incentives between tenants and owners of a building. So who wants to take this question? Stefan, maybe you can start about the energy poverty role in the Commission Renovation Wave.
Thank you, Felice. Indeed, energy poverty is one of the key challenges, but it's not only energy poverty, it's also poverty as such. The objective is to address the worst performing buildings. So the worst performing buildings are the ones which are not only poor in terms of energy performance and people who are actually deprived and vulnerable, but also are deficient in terms of health, safety, social inclusion does not happen. People feel stigmatized. And that is a major social problem. So we would like to set the priority on the worst performing buildings more broadly and also focus the minimum energy performance standards on them directly through an EU level scheme, but also by appealing to the member states to give utmost priority to that. And as I mentioned before, there's a very significant public goods character in that. So there will have to be public support. Public funds will have to flow into that. Otherwise, nothing will happen. Those controlling and owning and living in the worst performing buildings are often the ones who cannot carry out the renovations. So if we leave these people behind, the renovation wave will fail, not only in terms of energy and climate, but also the broader social policy and society policies. There are significant funds available from the recovery, but also possibly in the future from or even already from either ETS or other sources, and there will have to be state aid also flowing into that. But of course the member states will have a decisive and crucial role in defining and also in the long-term renovation strategies we've asked and member states are obliged to lay out and design energy poverty policies, make sure that affordability can be ensured. The benefits from a renovation are significant in terms of energy savings, but they're usually less than actually the costs which would fall on people if you passed on the cost. So this has to be buffered clearly, and that's what we are working on and trying to get through really the funds and make sure that they are available at sufficient volumes.
Thank you, Stefan. On this question, I would like also to hear more from Robert, because member states have a big role in implementing the European program and directing funding toward an initiative or the other. So in Netherlands, are you taking care of poor owners or even more important to tenants?
Yes, well, I agree with what Stefan was saying, that energy poverty is not an issue in itself. So energy poverty is always, or most times, combined with other kinds of poverty. So it's a social issue as well, and at least that's how we treat it in the Netherlands as well. So if you are not able to pay your energy bill, then most times you are not able to pay other bills as well. And that because of that, we integrate that into our social policies. When it comes to renovation of buildings, especially the lowest quality buildings, where most times also the poorest people are living, that's where we have signed an agreement with the national building corporation, so the social housing sector, in 2013 already, to renovate especially that part of the market. So that's more than 2.5 million buildings in the Netherlands, and we have signed an agreement that they are going to take up the energy performance level of those buildings to label B somewhere in the near future, or by now, and they have succeeded in that. So and at the same time, energy poverty did not really rise. So you can make with the building owners, which is in the Netherlands most times the social housing sector, you can make agreements with them to renovate, and well, it works, but we have to take it a step further even, I think.
Thank you, Stephen. I understand that you also have a remark on this. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Sure. Yeah, just very briefly, we're working with cities across Europe, and one of the things we're asking them to track is the impact that their renovation initiatives have on energy poverty. And the feedback we've had from them is they're really keen to be able to track it, but they're hampered by a lack of a common definition either at the member states at the national level or at the EU level. So there's a lack of clarity on, you know, what is how do we even define energy poverty that is holding cities back from really being able to address this issue. Thank you.
Something for Stefan to take note and maybe act at DG Energy. I also would like to take other two questions that are quite close, very technical, and in this probably Anna Vera and Dominic might tell us a bit more. So one question from Peter Hoffman from European Research Division. Do you have examples for upcycling in the building material recycle process? Will the cost of the separation and logistic not eat the benefit? And a similar question on the same topic from John Frenzel. So far, the reuse and recycling, upcycling of building materials mainly encompasses facade, interior, fit out, and landscaping materials. How do you rate the necessary strategies for structural building elements for new buildings?
Maybe I should refer to the structural elements of a building, because this is what we are discussing in a very hot way now in Vienna. First of all, of course, the structural system of a building, this should last in best case forever. But when it comes to reusing, for example, beams made of steel, then we have to solve now some issues concerning quality and, of course, of legal certainty. So I think in the first stage, we really should emphasize on the other three layers of a building, just because to be sure that our buildings are durable in terms of structural integrity.
Thank you, Anna Vera. Dominic, how can we solve this problem?
Yeah, so these are great questions. I may try to answer them in the order. So examples for upcycling building materials. I think there's a lot in the building which can be reused, starting with the outside. So facade elements, of course, are interesting, but also bricks, right? So you can quite easily reuse bricks. There are also quite good architecture offices. Good examples. One is Lendecha in Denmark, but also in super use in the Netherlands. So I would say these are really showing great examples of reusing, for example, bricks, but also, for example, bricks which are with concrete. You can definitely cut them completely out and put them on a new wall, for example. But also interior materials are very interesting. So there are plenty of materials. Even the EU has a building which was made out of reclaimed windows, I think. But now the costs are very important. Normally you pay for the landfilling of the material. Now that gives you actually a good, quite high, how to say, so you can actually account the cost for like separation and also recertification into that. And normally we normally are cost neutral on most of the materials. But of course, we hope that with new methods for deconstruction, the cost will also decrease, so they are more attractive to new materials. And regarding the structural elements, as Anna also pointed out, I think steel beams are very interesting because we calculated that and we see that we can save 98%, so 98% of GHG emissions when we reuse steel beams. So and steel is, besides of concrete, like the largest polluter in that sector. So we see that great opportunity. And we are also right now working on reintroducing steel beams as a structural element in new buildings. But of course, there we have the complexity that we really have to check that. But you can definitely apply all the checks for a new steel beam, also for a reclaimed steel beam. So still, of course, we would wish for legislation which looks at reclaimed brick steel beams and they're the checks. But there's also other structural elements such as wood for roof constructions, or also here again bricks, recycling concrete, and so on. So a lot of opportunities actually.
Thank you, Dominic. So I see that we are a bit running over time also because we started later than expected. I would like, after this, I would say, excellent panel discussion where, you know, you all agree on most of the topics, but you were also able to identify important barriers that need to be lifted to make the renovation wave happen. I would like to ask all of you, what is the main message that you would like the audience to take away? You have 30 seconds each. Anna Vera, the main message.
The main message is that we have to start yesterday. In Vienna, we are making small steps, but now we are doing them because it is so important for us to know that when we are not regarding or referring to circularity in the very beginning of a building, we cannot update it later on.
Thank you, Anna Vera. Stefan.
Thank you, Felice. I think the main message is we are all in this. We have to work together, but in order to trigger the dynamics, we also have to basically have obligations to act. Otherwise, it will not happen. But supported with money, public funds, but also private money coming in, and with reduced risks and technical support. We need to have a holistic agenda in our mind. Think about material efficiency, circularity, but also the social aspects, and really making buildings a better place to be. Buildings become more and more important, and I think that is what we all have to consider. And I think working together across the borders, exchanging good practices, and seeing buildings as a major challenge which we have to deal with in the next, I would even say, 3 decades.
Thank you, Stefan. Robert.
After 2 such main messages, what else do I have to add? But well, start now, yes, and start building the city of the future now, and we have to do that together. And so yes, it will be on a personal level for sometimes some inconvenience, but in the end it will be better. So see it as an opportunity as well. Don't see it just as, oh, well, I have to do this. No, it's an opportunity to make your own home, your own neighborhood better for yourself and for your children. So yes, start now, because the world is not stable. The world is changing all the time. We have climate change, and we have to act in order to stay on the same level or even improve it for the years to come.
Thank you, Robert. Steven, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, difficult to follow this summing up. I would perhaps just draw people's attention, given what we've been talking about this morning, draw people's attention to the EU Taxonomy, which I think is a really bold, very challenging, but very exciting opportunity, particularly when we think about circularity and renovation. We're a part of the EU Platform on Sustainable Finance, working at the moment on expanding the taxonomy from what's already available in terms of the current delegated act, which tackles climate change mitigation and adaptation. What will be coming is further criteria for the other environmental objectives that the taxonomy covers, which include circular economy as well as biodiversity, pollution, and water. And so the taxonomy criteria, once they're available, will hopefully unlock further finance, further demand for circularity in the sector, and I think will be a really key opportunity and driver for some of the policy change that I think Dominic has highlighted is really necessary for really pushing what's possible in terms of circular materials and incorporating a whole life carbon approach into EU buildings policy and into the renovation wave in particular. So do look out for the consultation that's coming. It will be launched, I believe, at the end of July and run over the summer into September. So do look out for that, do respond. It's a great opportunity to drive this agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, Dominic, you have the most difficult task to provide an additional takeaway after these 4 brilliant takeaways. So go ahead.
Definitely brilliant. Yeah, I think I can just say, yeah, act now, and it's possible. We show like we can act already now, and to encourage others, I think we have to all work together for the greater good to prevent climate change. And so everyone has to work together, good laws, good communication, and so on. And then I think we can really reach that aim. So I'm really looking forward for an exciting journey in this renovation wave, but in the end to reduce CO2 emission. Yeah.
Thank you, Dominic. So I was supposed also to give some concluding remarks, but I think that, after this, there is no room left for me. I just want to stress again, and this is also what I learned today from hearing from panelists from very different, the Commission, a city, a member state, a private company, organizations. So it's really important that we align our actions. We work all together, because to make the renovation wave happen, it's not enough to work at EU level. We have to go at the city level, at the building level, at the apartment level, and make this happening. So this is probably the most important challenge I have learned today from this panel. I would like to thank once again Anna Vera, Stefan, Robert, Stephen, and Dominique for the fantastic panel discussion, and Forum Europe to arrange such an impactful event. I think that in a couple of minutes, a new webinar on sustainable and resilient food systems in city will start. So stay tuned on the main stage. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you very much. All the best to you. It's really a pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.